that. So today is the 26th. Both the Rotary Club of Edmonton and the Rotary Club of Edmonton West meet on Mondays. This is our first attempt at a joint club meeting and a bit of what we call a speaker series with some prominent speakers that are quite interesting and a connection of a lot of Rotarians that over the years have gotten to know each other. So real neat initiative there. Of course, we are on Treaty 6 territory, the Edmonton West Land Acknowledgement that was created by our club. We live, work, and meet on Treaty 6 lands. We acknowledge and respect that this is an enduring agreement between First Nations and the Crown that applies to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge and respect the cultures, languages, and histories of the First Nations, the first peoples on and the original stewards of the land. We recognize that the Métis have a deep historical connection to this land. People come from all over Canada and the world to make this land their home. We welcome their stories of connection to this land as well. As Rotarians, we seek to advance understanding, goodwill, friendship, and peace through the ideal of service. We are all treaty peoples, sharing the land, respecting each other, and learning how to be part of reconciliation. Oh, pardon me. So welcome Rotarians, guests, interested people to a inaugural joint meeting of our two clubs. Glad you could join us today, and I think you'll find especially the speaker very interesting. Some Zoom rules. These are consistent, of course, for the last year and a half. I think we've gotten fairly used to. Please be respectful of speakers and mute when you aren't speaking, and we'll certainly recognize you following the speaker if there are any questions there. There's a hand icon that you can use. Or we have some spotters to watch for some hands when we get to that point. So the Rotary theme for 2021-2022, serve to change lives. Both of our clubs are very service-oriented clubs, so it certainly resonates with our clubs this year. I am the Rotary Club of Edmonton 21-22 president. That is me. Planting trees. Our club is very active, so we certainly have fun with a lot of active volunteering. I'll turn it over to Jim to introduce his club and himself.
Thanks, Jason. I'm Jim Saunderson. I'm president of the Edmonton Club, or the Rotary Club of Edmonton, the oldest club in Northern Alberta. We're celebrating our 150th year of service. Our focus is, we're known as the Downtown Club. Our focus is on the downtown. We do work with the Boyle McCully and Operation Friendship Center, Operation Friendships Senior Center, and also with youth, and do a lot of work with Jason and colleagues on the international front as well. And we're delighted to be here with our colleagues from Edmonton West, other Rotarians, and visiting guests.
I will now turn it over to Don McFarlane. If he's on, we're going to talk a little fundraising that our clubs are doing at this point. Is Don on the line? Oh, actually, I don't see. Oh, yeah. Don, are you on?
Yes, I'm just unmuting and happy to be here. Great to see everybody. Yes, coming up August 9th is our $1 million hole-in-one golf tournament. And I have sent out a number of reminders and another one this morning to all of the downtown Rotarians about some of our last minute needs as we start the final organization. So hopefully they will see that and respond to it. And certainly to any members from West Edmonton who would wish to join us. We do have room for a few more foursomes. Your president, Jason Bossert, is joining us with a foursome, and we welcome any others from the West End Club that wish to join us and play some golf and help us raise some money for the Lorana shelter.
Good, thank you, Don. Our
Sorry,
club
Jason, is Melinda Noyes there? I think she was going to just add in a word about the online auction.
okay.
Sorry.
Yep, I am here. So online auction is live now. It just launched this morning, and I'll put the link in the chat. It's 32auctions.com. Lots of great items, including a flight to the Yukon, Gretzky jersey that is autographed, and a weekend at the Fairmont. So yeah, sign on, do your bidding. Thank you.
Thanks, Melinda. Our club is doing a fundraiser, a very fun, timely fundraiser, especially through the little heat wave we had a few weeks ago. We are partnering with Marie Shart's Hot Sauce, which is a organization out of Belize, and a terrific organization, very community oriented. And 20% of purchases of their hot sauce goes directly to Belize literacy initiatives. This certainly will resonate with the senator, being a very strong supporter who I've seen many times speak on literacy. So we're thrilled to be involved in that. A lot of the work we do with a local organization called Literacy Without Borders, and in partnership with Center for Family Literacy, which I know the senator knows well, and some of the programs that the Center for Family Literacy actually developed are actually being used in Belize. So if you go to, you sort of contact me, you'll be getting more information, but it's terrific product. It's more than just hot sauce. And again, it raises a lot of money, goes directly to Belize literacy. And it's my wife, Lisa, approved, as you can see here, because that's about a third of what we ordered in our first order. So we're doing our part. July is Leadership Month. I raise this because I think I want to recognize this initiative on the speaker series and this joint club meeting and speaker initiative was the brainchild of the program committees and some of the people of the two clubs. For West, it's Rob Dunseith and Joe Lizotte, who are our co-chairs. And for the Downtown Club, Jim Saunderson, Brian Edwards, and Barry Schloss. I think this is very exciting going forward, and they are certainly leaders in this initiative. So I wanted to certainly recognize that. Now on to the reason everyone is tuning in. I will turn it over to Rob Dunseith to introduce our first inaugural guest speaker today, Senator Paula Simons.
Thank you, Presidents Jason and Jim. It's my great pleasure to introduce Senator Paula Simons today. Paula Simons was appointed to the Senate of Canada on October 3rd, 2018. She's affiliated with the Independent Senators Group. Senator Simons was born and raised in Edmonton. She earned a BA honors degree in English literature from the University of Alberta and a master's degree in journalism from Stanford University, before spending time as a fellow at the Poynter Institute for Media Studies. She has been a radio documentary maker, a playwright, a television pundit, a magazine writer, a podcaster, and an author of popular history. But she is certainly best known for her work as a political columnist and investigative journalist with the Edmonton Journal. Over the course of her 23 years with the Journal, Simons earned 2 national newspaper awards for her investigations and analysis of Alberta's troubled child welfare system. Her investigative work on Indigenous child welfare and government cover-ups of the deaths of children in foster care also earned her recognition from the UNESCO Canadian Committee for World Press Freedom and for Journalists for Human Rights. Senator Simons was part of 2 Edmonton Journal breaking news teams that won national newspaper awards for their coverage of the Fort McMurray wildfire and for their stories on the murder of 4 RCMP officers at Rochford Bridge, Alberta. She earned 6 further national newspaper award citations of merit for her columns and editorials on Alberta politics. She's received recognition from the Alberta Centre for Civil Liberties Research for her work championing LGBTQ rights, from the Canadian Bar Association for her writing on legal affairs, from the Canadian Mental Health Association for her columns on mental health care, and from the Edmonton Historical Board for her work as a popular historian and champion of heritage preservation. I'm very excited to have Paula Simon speaking to us today, as I'm sure all of you are. I'll turn over the floor to you, Senator Simons. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for coming out today, as it were, coming out in this virtual form. It is an honor to be with you here. I usually begin by saying that I'm honored to be speaking to you from Miskatchewan, the Cree name for Edmonton. But today I learned that I've perhaps been giving too much privilege to the Cree name for Edmonton. I learned today that the Blackfoot name for Edmonton is Omukoyas, and the Nakota Sioux name is Titunga, which I really like. Titunga, it makes it sound vaguely tropical. And the Tsuut'ina name is Nasagachu. So I'm glad to be with you here in all of those places on the traditional territories of the Cree, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, Saulteaux, and Cree nations, and in the heartland of the Métis Nation as well. I was asked to speak to you today about the proposition to have an Alberta pension plan. Now, I should begin by saying I am not an economist. I am not an actuary. I am not an accountant. I am not even a pensioner. That's still about a decade out. Nor am I an expert in pensions, but I am a journalist at heart and a senator in practice. And I was approached a few months ago by the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, and they had a challenge that they were looking for my help with. They wanted to know how they could get information to Albertans to tell the success story of the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board without making it look like they were interfering in a possible referendum, and without making it look like they were campaigning on behalf of the Liberal government, because they are a completely independent board. They are not part of any government apparatus. And so as I talked to them about the challenges that they were facing getting information to Albertans at a time when it still seemed possible that we might have a pension referendum question, it started me thinking about the question. And so I am delighted to be able to speak to you about this today. The Canada Pension Plan is a relatively new thing. It was created 2 years after I was born, so it's old, but not that old. And it was meant to be a national program for all provinces and territories, but it didn't quite work out that way. Because in 1965, the year before the pension plan came together, Quebec, which was eager to be maître chez nous, master in its own house, decided it wanted to have its own pension plan and not be part of the new CPP. Quebec's population then was younger than the Canadian average, and the province had a very high birth rate. This is at a time when the Catholic Church still had a great deal of social power in Quebec. And the province believed that its fund with lower contribution rates would be a better deal for Quebec employers, workers, and their future retirees. But as the power of the Catholic Church diminished, the birth rate in Quebec plummeted, and corporations which feared separatist sentiment decamped with their head offices to Toronto, and lots of people did too. The population aged. And today, Quebec has a pension plan contribution rate of 11.8%, while the CPP contribution rate is 10.9%. In other words, Quebecers pay significantly more to get about the same pension back. And while the Quebec Pension Fund's annualized investment return over the last 5 years was 8.1%, which is perfectly respectable, the CPP's return was a much more enviable 10.4%. In fact, the CPP has the highest investment returns of any Canadian pension plan. And for me, that's an important cautionary tale when we start to debate the idea of a standalone Alberta pension. Sure, we could do it. Quebec has its own pension, and we could too. But why exactly would we want to break away from one of the world's most successful public pension plans? There are certainly those who argue that we pay too much into the program and don't get our fair share back. Albertans are very big on getting their fair share. There are those who want us to quit the CPP, though, on principle, as a sign of Alberta autonomy. And then there are those who believe we should have our own pension so that we could direct its funds to support Alberta's struggling economy, especially our beleaguered energy sector. Now, yes, let's start with the first point. It's true, Albertans do pay more into the Canada Pension Plan than they get out. In 2017, payments from Alberta workers made up 16.5% of all CPP contributions, while Alberta pensioners only got back 10.6% of CPP benefits, Well, that doesn't seem very fair. But I have to tell you that this is not because of some nefarious anti-Alberta plot. It's a simple question of demographics. It's because our province has so many younger workers and because we have such a high workforce participation rate. It's also, though, because Alberta seniors, as you probably know, often head to cheaper, warmer parts of Canada to retire, say to Kelowna or Cowichan Bay or Cape Breton. You may have friends and family who've done the same. In fact, the imbalance that was cited in 2017 has already changed. By 2019, the last date for which I was able to get numbers, Alberta's contributions to the CPP had already dropped to 15.9% of the national total. That's down from, what did I say, 16.5% 2 years before. And that number may continue to trend down as more and more workers between the ages of 20 and 29 flee Alberta, looking for better economic opportunities and, to be blunt, more congenial political climates. We are already seeing a disturbing outmigration of young workers and young professionals from this province. Maybe your children or your grandchildren have already left for Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal, or for Beijing or London or Melbourne. My own daughter, who's 24, is in law school at the University of Victoria, and she, to my great distress, seems to have no intention of coming back to Alberta. So yes, a Made in Alberta pension plan might mean lower contribution rates for employers and workers in the short term. Long term, as our population ages and as young people leave, we may all have to pay far more to keep such a scheme afloat. But the benefit we have now is a fully portable national pension scheme, one which is ideally suited for Alberta's highly mobile population. Albertans are people on the move. This is a place where people leave for university and then come back. They move here for work and then head back home to Twillingate or Moncton. A national pension plan is ideal for this province in particular, where so many workers fly in and out, working here but living elsewhere. We could hardly have designed a plan that would be better for Alberta's economic interests. Because with a national plan, it doesn't matter where you study, where you work, or where you retire. Your contributions and benefits remain the same. They travel with you. They are portable. If we created our own pension system, whatever promises of portability we make, it will surely be harder to convince people to move here to work when we need their labor. And it could potentially make it harder for older Albertans to retire elsewhere in Canada. So what about the second argument? That we could leverage and deploy the funds in an Alberta pension plan to support Alberta's economy? Well, sure. We could use Alberta's retirement dollars to invest in struggling businesses here. Uh-oh, my battery is running low because I thought I was plugged into the power and I'm not. So before I do anything else, I'm going to plug in my computer so that I do not disappear on you. Thank you for that little bell of warning. Okay, so let me go back to where we were. So yes, we could use our pension funds to invest here. But pension funds are not meant to help a government micromanage a local economy, nor to fund a politician's pet project. They're supposed to be resolutely apolitical and completely insulated from ideological or political interference. It would make no economic sense at all for an Alberta pension plan to invest in oil and gas, which are struggling industries, at the expense of putting our retirement savings at risk just to help out one industry, an industry which happens to have close ties to the particular government. But it would be just as wrong for a possible future NDP government to direct pension dollars to invest exclusively in green tech, in wind farms or solar panels. Pension dollars aren't meant to be used to prop up governments or to advance any government's political agenda. They don't belong to premiers, they belong to us. It's our money. A good pension plan, good pension plans seek out sound investments with solid returns, and they limit risk by investing in a bunch of different places and a bunch of different economic sectors. They don't put all their eggs in one basket. And the more contributors you have paying in, the bigger the pension plan, the more people are paying in, the less risk there is for everyone else because it's all averaged out. An Alberta-only pension fund, because Alberta is so much smaller a province than Quebec and so much smaller than Canada, it would have a limited size and scope, and it would be far more vulnerable and volatile. We would be spreading the risk around fewer people. The CPP currently has a almost $500 billion investment fund, and it is administered by a completely independent board. No prime minister, no government, no governor of the Bank of Canada can interfere with its investment decisions. And it's actually harder to change the governance structure of the CPP investment board than it is to amend the Constitution. It requires the consent of 2/3 of provinces representing 2/3 of Canada's population. That makes monkeying with the system very, very difficult. The plan simply can't be manipulated for political gain to help any prime minister or any premier. And the CPP Investment Board is a big international player. It has offices in London, Luxembourg, Mumbai, Hong Kong, New York, San Francisco, Sao Paulo, and Sydney. And less than 16% of its funds are invested in Canada. Almost all its money is invested abroad. Now, how on earth could Alberta duplicate that reach and expertise? AIMCO, which manages Alberta's various pension and investment funds, does have international offices, but it has nothing like the international scope and reach of the CPP. What on earth would it even cost us to try and match that level of international investment portfolio? One more thing. The CPPIB, that's the Canadian Pension Fund Investment Board, currently has $11.1 billion invested in Alberta. And most of that is money belonging to other Canadians. That's not the sort of investment we ought to risk losing to make some pouty political point about provincial powers. Quitting the CPP in a huff as a sort of symbolic sop to a few Wexit malcontents might move us closer to some kind of sovereignty association. It might score some short-term populist points and win a politician some votes. But the cost to our economy and the jeopardy to our retirements could be incalculable. So too may be the costs to Confederation and the nature of Canada itself. And what precisely would individual Albertans gain? Well, perhaps a lot of liabilities. Just yesterday, I was out walking my dog and I bumped into my former colleague from the Journal, Sheila Pratt, who was having a drink on an outdoor patio with Ellen Nygaard, who happens to be a retired pension policy advisor to the Alberta government. And I mentioned to Sheila and Ellen that I would be speaking to you today. And Ellen told me this, something I hadn't thought about before. A Canadian province has the right to withdraw from the Canada Pension Plan to set up its own pension if it guarantees that its replacement plan would pay comparable benefits. And any hypothetical Alberta pension plan would be required to assume total liability for all pensions earned via work performed in Alberta from 1966, when the pension plan began, until those Albertans retired or drew their pensions, regardless of where the people who earned those pensions now live. Ellen Nygaard says those liabilities would greatly exceed those for current Alberta residents. So in other words, even if the Canada Pension Plan gave us back a fair share of its assets to set up our own plan, Ellen Nygaard estimates that the transfer would cover only about 1/4 of Alberta's total pension liabilities. In other words, we would be on the hook to pay tens of billions of dollars in pension to people who haven't lived in Alberta for years or perhaps decades. And yes, I guess it's possible that the other provinces might agree to amend the CPP rules to help us out of that fix. But again, amending CPP rules requires the consent of 2/3 of all provinces representing 2/3 of Canada's population. That's higher than the threshold to amend the Constitution. So the odds of a bailout, especially when we're being this pugnacious, I can't quite see that other Canadian provinces would be willing to rewrite the rules for us in the current political climate. In short, I'm very, very glad that Premier Kenney has decided that we are not having a referendum on an Alberta pension plan this October after all. But I remain concerned that Albertans are being whipped up in a fever of resentment against the rest of Canada, that all kinds of people are out there looking for scapegoats for our current economic woes in all the wrong places. Albertans, we need to get our economic house in order, but we can't do that by raiding the funds of pensioners to bail out failing and faltering industries. We can't gamble the savings of retirees and hope that will somehow help us to make this necessary but difficult economic transition. And we can't get where we need to be by going to war with the rest of Canada, even if it's a war of words. We need to solve our problems as a united country, working together. We need our friends. We need our neighbors. Alberta, as a landlocked province with a small population, cannot survive as an independent country. Meanwhile, trying to create a form of sovereignty association, a kind of separatism light, just gets in the way of the urgent and important work we need to do to rebuild the promise of our province. I am an Albertan, first, last, and always. But I believe Alberta can best achieve its potential as a partner and a leader in confederation. Sulks and tantrums cannot help us build the alliances we need to prosper and succeed. Neither can dramatic gestures that put our retirements all at risk. So remember, when you hear politicians talking about the Canada Pension Plan, the Alberta Pension Plan, that's your money. It belongs to you. It belongs to you and your friends and your spouses and your children and your grandchildren. And it ought not to be used to gamble. We need to be working together in sensible, thoughtful ways to get this province back on track, and to do that as a full partner in the confederation that needs us. I've come to an end now, but I'm very happy to take questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Senator Simons, and we'll open the floor up to questions here. If you want to put them in the chat function, that's would be great, because then I won't be sure to miss you. There's 50 some people here, so it's hard to catch. The alternative is to use the function where you can raise your hand, and Jason and I will kind of keep an eye open and try to spot questioners. It's much easier, Senator, when the audience is live and you can see somebody standing up.
Yeah, it was much easier to speak to them when the audience is live too. I mean, I can, it's tough to see everybody's faces and their eyes, their facial expressions, and to make eye contact and do all those good things.
Can't do that. Okay.
So it looks like Vicky had her hand raised. Jim.
Great.
Well, thank you, Senator. That was a really great presentation, very informative. Although it might seem one-sided, it is in fact a balanced view of the situation. I wanted to note that one of the reasons why we wouldn't get as many assets as liabilities that you mentioned is because for the first 33 years or 32 years that the Canada Pension Plan existed, the federal government didn't actually make all contributions. They took the money that was contributed into general revenue in return for a promise to pay pensions. And so there were no investment returns, no CPPIB. It was created in 1997. And so for pensions that go back to that era, they are currently still being paid out of Government of Canada general funds, not out of the Canada Pension Plan.
I did not know that. Maybe you should get Vicky to do the presentation next week.
Well, people get a single check. They don't get one from the government and one from CPP. But essentially, the CPP recovers it from the government for that period of time. So if they're, not that I think we should have an Alberta plan, because your arguments about economies of scale and so on are really important. There would have to be an arrangement made for pensions attributable to that period of time.
Wow, I hadn't realized that. So, I mean, I think we all know that, there used to be stories 20 years ago about how much trouble the Canada Pension Plan was in. And the CPPIB is relatively, it's less than 25 years old. And it has been a tremendous success. But I had not realized that was the reason that there would be so many liabilities outstanding.
Well, and it meant that through the whole inflationary 80s and 90s, when funded pension plans grew huge surpluses as a result of investment returns, the Canada Pension Plan did not, because all it held was promises to pay by the government, which were face value of the amount of the pension. And so there was no surplus. The CPP got a little bit of surplus between 97 and the early 2000s, but they missed a lot of the really boom years for investment returns because of how the government handled it.
Wow, that's really frustrating to know. Thank you very much.
It's a good piece of information, the history of it, and I think it really changed it as she said about 25 years ago. I've got Alistair with a question, and then I'm going to go. Bernie has one in the chat function, will be the second question. But over to you, Alistair.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator. That was an excellent presentation. And I think you should speak to everybody in Alberta, actually.
One Rotary Club at a time.
Yeah. I have a question that's not quite on the pension plan, but in your time as a senator, what is the view of senators of Alberta? Because I think it's hard for us to get, or it's hard for me anyway, to get a sense from Ottawa of what their view really is. And, you know, my view of the current prime minister is not very positive, I have to say. And I don't believe that he has much use for Alberta except for the money that he receives. So what's the view of the senators that you interact with or that you know on both sides of the spectrum there of this province?
You know, this is a very legitimate question, and I think it's very close to the question Bernie has asked in the chat as well. There is no question that people in central Canada have a very particular view of Alberta, which I think is not a helpful view. There are lots of reasons that they have that view, that we are a province of rednecks and hyper-conservatives, and that, you know, that people here all drive around playing banjos in pickup trucks. And there are all kinds of reasons that we could speculate for why people think that. One of them, frankly, and I say this having worked in the media for many, many years, is that there's a central Canadian media narrative that tends to put that story out there. You know, I like to comment that when Greta Thunberg was here having her giant rally in Edmonton, and tens of thousands of people took to the streets of Edmonton to support her, it was one of the biggest rallies in Edmonton history. And there were, you know, 5 guys from Red Deer who drove up in trucks to protest. And the CBC story was about them and not about the tens of thousands of Albertans who marched in support of Greta Thunberg. So, you know, there is this constant narrative that gets played out about how backwards we are here. It is unfortunate that some of our political leaders also like that narrative and, you know, choose to pick fights and sort of play up our differences instead of our similarities. So I've really taken it upon myself as an Alberta senator to speak to other senators, to get them to understand the complexity of Alberta, to get them to understand, for example, that Edmonton has very different politics than Calgary. You know, one of my first speeches in the Senate, I pointed out that Alberta had sent more NDP MPs to Ottawa than Ontario had. You know, so people have a very warped sense of who we are here. And so I've been trying to do all kinds of things within the Senate on social media to try and explain what Alberta really is. I've never met the Prime Minister, so I don't know what goes on in his beautifully coiffed head. I don't think that he has disdain for Alberta. I think initially he tried very, very hard to win friends and to win votes here. I think it should not be overlooked that the federal government made a massive investment and backstop of the TMX pipeline. I think it should not be overlooked that the federal government has just invested heavily in hydrogen production and center of excellence just outside of Edmonton. I think the problem is that politicians of all stripes, and I say this as an independent senator, but politicians from every party, what they like are votes, and they like to win votes. And if people in Alberta will not vote Liberal, no matter what the Liberal Party does or gives Alberta, then, you know, eventually they start to think, finally, throw up your hands and say, what's the point? Conversely, when Stephen Harper was prime minister, we also got shafted. I mean, talk to Ed Stelmach sometime about how difficult it was to deal with the Harper government, because the Harper government took all our votes for granted. And so they also didn't give us stuff. So, you know, Albertans could learn a lot from Quebec about strategic voting and about changing our votes during different elections to achieve different outcomes. Quebec votes brilliantly to achieve what it wants to achieve. They're mad at the Liberals, they vote for the Bloc. So the Liberals then give them things and then the Bloc numbers go down. You know, if we don't vote thoughtfully, then the Conservatives take us for granted and say, well, we can do whatever we want to Alberta because they'll vote for us no matter what. And the Liberals don't try to win votes here because they say, what is the point?
Okay, well, thanks for that, Senator. And I really take your point. I worked a lot in Ottawa over my career as well. And the bottom line is Alberta is a bigger and much more complex place than sort of that stereotypical image we have of cowboys driving F-150s down gravel roads.
You know, I mean, my next door neighbor is a gay interior designer, and outside of his house, he has a little Volvo and a pickup truck because he uses his pickup truck because he works in the construction sector, right? So it's not that there's anything wrong with the occasional pickup truck, but to decide that, you know, you're going to say that that's our image. I mean, when my daughter left Alberta, she said to me, I want to live in a place where people don't have truck nuts. And, you know, I think that's a legitimate point of view for a progressive young woman. We need to decide, you know, this province is so much more complicated than the narrative that we're trapped in allows us to recognize. Are any of you cowboys?
I do have a pickup truck.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I can ride a horse because I went through a horsey phase in my teens, but I'm not a cowboy.
I think probably, Senator, the question that Bernie had, I think you probably covered that off. There was one that you may have covered during your talk from Scott Montgomery of our club about the, it's in the chat function there, if I can just scroll down to it here. Scott's question is, it's my understanding that the Alberta Investment Management Corporation has been proposed as the possible manager for any new Alberta pension plan. How many dollars does AIMCO presently manage? How does its return on investment compare with the CPP?
All right, so I can answer the second question because I had this somewhere. AIMCO had a very bad year last year, and so I feel a little bit guilty, you know, making them look like they're terrible because they had one very bad year, but they had one very bad year. And I'm sorry, I had this. Hang on a second, I will look this up quickly. But I don't know how much AIMCO has right now. It is taking unto itself other public service sector pension plans. Its asset base is growing all the time. So it's true that it wouldn't just be managing the Alberta pension plan, but okay. So I will read you out some numbers. So for this last fiscal year, April 1st to March 31st, so 2020 to 2021, the CPPIB did even better than it did the year before. So the CPPIB had returns of 12.1%. AIMCO in that same period had returns of 2.5%. So it's not really fair to take one snapshot in time because any fund can have a bad year. AIMCO had a really, really, really bad year. And they made some very dubious investment decisions. And, you know, and this is the problem. The smaller the plan, the greater the shock when you make a mistake. That said, you know, some big public sector pension plans in Canada actually lost money this year. The OMER had a negative 2.7 return on investment this year. So, you know, it was COVID. It was a difficult year, but the more you can spread out your investment, the more you can pool the risk. So.
Okay, thank you. I think Rob Dunseith, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just see that Vicky had posted this information as
Vicky,
well.
you should have been doing this presentation instead of me.
Yeah, the 2020 annual report of AIMCO says that their assets under administration was $118.6 billion. And I see Vicky has helpfully posted comparative figures for the for the CPP Investment Board as 4,972 billion.
I think there's a,
Yeah. Oh,
I think there's a
497.2 billion.
yeah. So as I said, just under 500 billion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So about, about 5 times, well, 4 times anyways, large.
Yeah. So, I mean, AIMCO has what's left of the Heritage Trust Fund. It's got various public pensions. So, and if it, if as planned, it takes over the teachers' pensions and, the other public sector pensions, it will be even bigger. But again, it's managing a bunch of different funds, which presumably have different risk management strategies and different degrees of risk aversion.
I've got time for a couple more questions. I've got Brian Edwards, and then I think Mike Ryan had his hand up as well.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Senator Simons. Most great clarity. We miss your clarity as a journalist, and hope that there is many coming up that can be as insightful and researchful based as you are. My question is not specifically on the pension topic, but more about the Senate itself. Now, you are part of what is called the Independent Senators Group. And can you maybe just help explain to me a little bit about what that is? I believe it is the biggest group in the Senate at the moment. And are all new senators part of that group, or are there still rumps of Conservative, NDP, and Liberal in the Senate? And more specifically then, where are we going in terms of the Senate and the function of the Senate in our overall governance?
Well, that is a really good question. And that one I do know all the answers to. So, I mean, when the Senate was established, it was established as a body with a government and an opposition. So it always had a red team and a blue team, the Liberals and the Conservatives under whatever name they were at the time. When Justin Trudeau was leader of the third party, going into the 2 elections ago, he tried to distinguish himself at a time when the Senate had been racked by scandal. And he said there would be no more Liberal senators. And he fired all the Liberal senators who were in the Senate. He couldn't take away their Senate seats, but he said, you can't call yourselves Liberals anymore. You're not going to be part of the Liberal Party. You're not going to caucus with us. Some of those Liberal senators are still very angry about that because they were Liberals since before, Justin Trudeau was born. But they had to take their lumps, and so they were made independent. And then when Prime Minister Trudeau won, he had to follow through with this promise. And so in his 2 tenures as Prime Minister, he's appointed 55 new senators. All of them are nonpartisan, small I independent senators. So if you look at the Senate today, there are 4 groups. When I speak to school groups, I always say like the 4 Hogwarts houses. So there's the Independent Senators Group, but it was getting, frankly, too big, and it kind of split into 3. So the original Independent Senators Group has, I think at this point, 45 members. Then there's the Canadian Senators Group, which is a group of small C Conservatives. It's made up of people who quit the Conservative Party across the floor to sit with the CSG. It's made up with people who were originally members of the Independent Senators Group, and they even have 2 members who were former Liberal senators. But it is in general sort of a classically small C Conservative grouping of people who care about regional issues. There's the Progressive Senators Group, which is primarily made up of people who used to be Liberal senators, as well as some former members of the ISG who have crossed to them. So we have these 3 different independent caucuses: the ISG, the CSG, the PSG. Don't feel badly if you didn't know any of this. Most people don't, including, frankly, most reporters in the press gallery and most MPs. And then we still have 19 conservative senators who are still part of the Conservative Party, who caucus with Erin O'Toole and the Conservative MPs. They take their marching orders to a certain extent from Erin O'Toole. They are more independent than MPs, but they are still members of the Conservative Party and they walk the Conservative Party line. and they function as the official opposition. Even though they are much smaller than the ISG, they get all kinds of privileges and powers because of the traditional rules of the Senate, which give great power to the opposition, the official opposition. So what we have is a kind of untenable situation at the moment, because currently 80% of all senators are independent. So at full complement, there are 105 senators, of whom only 19 still belong to a political party. There were never any New Democrat senators because the Democrats don't believe in the Senate. So there are senators who used to be New Democrats in their previous lives, but there are no capital NDP senators. So we have a bit of a mess in the Senate right now, because we have 19 conservatives who have all this great institutional power and all the rest of us who don't. So Scott Tanis, who's an Alberta senator who leads the Canadian Senators Group, has been working very closely with Yuan Pao Wu, who's an independent senator from British Columbia, who is the leader of the Independent Senators Group. And they've been pushing very hard for major Senate reform that would give more power to the independent groups so that the Conservatives don't get all the power as their numbers shrink and shrink and shrink. So, there are interesting thought experiments that happen. If, for example, the Conservatives were to win what we assume is an upcoming federal election, they would still only have 19 senators. And who would be the official opposition? Because none of the other three groups is affiliated with the Liberal Party. Suppose the Liberals win a minority government next time round with the NDP as the official opposition, and the poll numbers show that's a possibility. Who then is the official opposition in the Senate? Because there is no NDP caucus. So we are very much a work in progress. But what the independence of the Senate has meant is that the Senate is much more powerful, because the Liberal government, Justin Trudeau could have appointed 55 loyal Liberals who would have voted the Liberal Party line. He didn't. He appointed a lot of very independent-minded people, some of whom were former Conservatives, some of whom were like me, just, ornery. And so he does not have the capacity to whip votes. Every piece of legislation that comes to the Senate floor, the government has to figure out a coalition of senators who will vote to support it. And so no bill gets rubber stamped anymore. Nothing is a given. So individual senators have a lot more clout than they've ever had. And as a result, we've been able to get much more work done amending bills. When it came to Bill C7, which was the expansion of medical aid in dying, the Senate had very passionate debate and proposed and supported strongly significant amendments to the bill, some of which the government accepted, one of which the government didn't accept outright, but said it would strike a special committee to study that amendment for advanced directives for medical aid in dying. So I think the Senate has never been a more exciting place, and it's never been more important to Canada's governance. I just don't think it gets, we're the Rodney Dangerfield house. We don't get no respect. So.
Thank you. It is interesting as the Senate evolves, and certainly just as a lay observer, certainly the Senate seems to be more active and stronger in their recommendations and in their advice to the government.
Yeah, and that's, in part that's because I think, at the risk of sounding immodest, because I'm not referring to me, the Trudeau government has appointed some truly extraordinary people to the Senate. Really smart people with governance and public policy experience, people who weren't patronage appointments, people who weren't, party loyalists. So there are some really powerful intellects in the Senate, really, really good people. But also, as I say, because of our independence, we have this capacity to really push ideas forward. And of course, I have the great good fortune, if we are indeed going to the polls in September, I will not, my seat is safe. So the great thing about senators is that they can push for things without worrying about popularity. And we can push for ideas that might be controversial because we have the safety that comes with the fact that we're appointed until the age of 75.
Thank you. A wonderful answer, and thank you.
I think we have time for one more quick question. an answer from Mike Ryan, over to you.
Paula, you mentioned ATRF in one statement. I received a pension from the Alberta Teachers Retirement Fund, basically due to my wife's passing. And I turned 65 about a month after her passing. And so I received two pensions, one CPP, and then I get ATRF. And the province is, you said something that they hadn't taken it over yet?
Well, they're in, I mean, I think it's,
I think it's a
it,
little,
yeah, it's, yeah.
a little farther down the
Yeah.
line. Many of the teachers that I'm hearing from are very upset with this. And they're looking to vote as a very large block against our current premier and his behaviors, because they're upset they're digging into our funds that were deposited by our fellow teachers and spouses in many cases. And we don't want that to happen. And we'd like to take it back. And I don't know how we could step forward on that, but we need to.
No, it's a really difficult situation, because if AIMCO were insulated from political interference, then I don't think it would be an issue, because AIMCO up until recently had a very good reputation as a solid fund manager, and it might be logical to group all of Alberta's funds together to get the best returns. The problem, I think, is that the premier and people close to the premier keep speaking about using those funds for political ends. And that's what's frightening, right? Because whether or not you think the oil industry has a big future, I mean, and let's be clear, the CPPIB invests in plenty of oil and gas things, right? But if you're going to use AIMCO for political reasons to advance a political agenda, it puts the funds of everyone in the AIMCO pot at risk. If we had a really reliable, trustworthy pension manager who wasn't being manipulated by the government of the day, it would be different. But once you start this, because, you know, what's the guarantee that if you get an NDP government, that it might not play the same kind of games? This is the thing that the CPPIB has as such a strength, is that it cannot be the victim of political interference. But, you know, I mean, I grew up in this province during, you know, that I came of political age as Peter Lougheed was transitioning into Don Getty and oil prices were falling. And anybody who was here at that time remembers the problems the Alberta government got in by trying to pick winners and trying to prop up businesses and trying to, you know, there's a reason that politicians are not investment bankers or fund managers. We don't have that expertise, and it shouldn't be. These things should not be politicized. They should be managed for the good, for the fiduciary, you know, duty should be to the pensioners and the future pensioners, not a duty paid to the politician who happens to be leading the province at any given moment.
And I'd agree with that. The basis, though, is ATRF was the best managed pension fund in Alberta, period. There was no better. And so that grab is just a straight money grab.
Well, you know, and the problem is too, I mean, did the teachers agree to that?
No.
You know, that's the problem, right? If the teacher, if the government of the day had come to the teachers and said, look, you know, you have a really well managed fund, maybe we need to bring over some of your fund managers and we'll all work together for the, you know, for the greater good. But when it's done by executive fiat, it's no wonder people feel robbed.
Yeah. Thank you.
And merci.
We have a family member in common in past history.
And who's that?
Marcia.
Ah, Marcia Simons.
Yes. We went to high school together.
Oh my goodness. Well, I will tell her that, I mean, Zoom has brought our cousins together. We keep having these like once a month cousin catch ups. So I know everybody's business better than I did before the pandemic.
If there's been one good thing to come out of this pandemic, it's in some ways it has brought us closer together. We have Rotarians from all over Alberta, or Northern Alberta at least, on this call today. Merci, Sénatrice Simons, pour votre présentation aujourd'hui. Thank you Thank you very much for it. I should just say in passing, I've had the opportunity in my career to testify both before House committees and Senate committees. Without saying anything negative about the House of Commons, I am a bit of a fan of the Senate as a result of those experiences.
Now, Senate committees are really good, and you can watch them live streamed, and I'll bet most Canadians have watched an American Senate committee hearing at some point or another. We're super fun. You could watch us instead.
I don't know about fun, but they do focus on the issue at hand in a relatively nonpartisan way, in an intelligent way, and I think that's commendable. One of the things that I think Rotary has done over the years that is also makes sense is supporting vaccines, and particularly the vaccination of children around the world to eliminate polio,
Yes.
which together with the World Health Organization and local governments, we have almost succeeded in doing, and we're not going to stop until we have banished that virus from the planet. So in recognition of your presentation today, Senator, we will be making a donation in your name to the Polio Plus organization.
Well, thank you
Rotary
so much,
sponsored.
because this is one of the things that Rotary does, for which I have the greatest respect. I mean, you have almost, you and your partners have almost completely wiped polio off the map. And at a time now when there's so much vaccine hesitancy in the zeitgeist, it's really important to remember, that this was a disease that destroyed people's lives, and vaccination, properly applied, is one of the greatest triumphs of the 20th century.
Well, on behalf of both the Edmonton Rotary Club and the Edmonton West Rotary Club, thank you for your presentation today. And over to you to wrap things up, Jason.
Thank you, Jim. I hate to do it because I could continue this discussion, and it's so fascinating. And I echo the comments that were made earlier that we miss your voice. I mean, I follow you through social media, so I get a lot of video updates and things. But yeah, that was great of you.
And you can all join me. I should put in a plug. This Wednesday, I am moderating a live forum on equalization, what it is, what it isn't, how it works, how it doesn't, what this referendum question can and cannot accomplish. And I'm going to be live streaming it on Facebook Live and YouTube on Wednesday at noon. And it will be banked afterwards. If you can't come Wednesday at noon, you can watch it on my YouTube channel. But if you're watching live, you can ask questions, and I'm going to have 5 incredibly smart experts to explain all the ins and outs of equalization. And I'm hoping that will be a good, nonpartisan, thoughtful discussion of a very vexed program.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder, because I certainly had that in my schedule. We'll circulate it to the club so that.
Thank you. If you could, that would be terrific.
Yeah, very happy to, and the district as well. Like I said, there's lots of Rotarians that are quite interested from other clubs in the district. So now to carry on the kind of the closing of the business portion of this meeting, just a reminder, there is no meeting next week. It's the long weekend, so everybody gets a break. So don't try to hit any Zoom links on next Monday, because you'll be left hanging on that. As we always do, ending a Rotary meeting with the 4-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? And I think in the topic today and the conversation today, I think that this resonates very well with a lot of what's going on in the environment, the political environment and whatnot. So on that, I wish you a good week. Thank you again so much for joining us, Rotarians and guests, and Senator Simons. It was really terrific to see you and hear you today, and good conversation.
Thank you all so much.